people who are viewing my channel are mainly business minded people, right? So I had a question for you. You're working with a lot of high level achievers and performers. What are the main similarities you see with those people?
The way that I kind of tend to think of them is as athletes. They're cognitive athletes, right? They're showing up every single day. They are highly motivated, right? They want to continue to grow and scale their business. And a lot of them know that they need to be functioning at a very high level if their business is going to be functioning at a high level.
When stress comes up, right? When they're feeling the pressure and it feels heavy, what could someone do?
The tool that they could use, again, that's the most impactful quickly, would be a functional breathing practice. So it needs to become a habit. And if it becomes a habit and they start to strengthen their nervous system up to new levels, they can get as much stress thrown at them and it doesn't affect them.
Wow. Welcome. In today's video, I have a special guest for you guys. His name is Dr. Mike Smith. He was once a client of mine. He's still a client of mine now, but now I view him more as a friend. We speak weekly or bi-weekly, and usually we're talking about business or health. I'm usually consulting him on marketing his practice, and he's usually consulting me on my personal health. And we have some great discussions. Mike is full of knowledge. And the reason I'm bringing him to the channel is because he specializes in peak performance. So he works with high-level business executives and achievers, and he helps them to relieve stress. He helps them deal with stress because with success comes a lot of stress, right? And he helps them deal with pressure. He helps them focus better on their work and allows them to achieve more of a flow state so that they can get more done, be more productive, and feel better while doing it. So that being said, I'm going to bring him into this Zoom room now, and we're going to have a chat. I'm going to interview him for you guys and get as much knowledge as I can out of him. Enjoy. What's up?
Great. Not much, man.
We can get right into it, man. Just get
Let's
right
do
into
it.
it. Like our normal weekly talks. No pressure. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so seriously, can you give background on you, like what you do in a nutshell? Quick elevator pitch.
Yeah, so I'm a naturopathic doctor, and my focus is in performance medicine, and the niche of folks that I work with are high performers, so entrepreneurs, business owners, high-level executives, and elite athletes.
Awesome. How'd you get into that? I don't even think I've ever asked you. What made you even want to do that?
Well, myself, I've always kind of had a performance background. So mine was sport and wrestling. So I did that since I was like 9 or 10.
You were good too.
I was good.
D1 wrestler, right?
D1, man. Yep.
D1 wrestler.
And so yeah, so that was, I was doing some of these things, and performance was always really important to me. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew that I was doing something to help improve my performance. So with, visualization, with changing my breathing, with taking sleep really seriously, with, taking my nutrition really seriously, all that stuff, supplementation, but I had no idea what I was doing. So after that, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't want to go the conventional route because I worked at a hospital and I kind of saw what that was. And it was a lot of polypharmacy. And so I knew I didn't want to do that. I found out what naturopathic medicine was, which is a much more holistic approach. And as I was in medical school, in fact, the very first day, there was a doc whose specialty was mind, body, and after talking to him, I was just like, holy shit, this is a specialty. Like I could do this for a living. Because it was all like immediately I was like, this is performance medicine is what it is. So I got really excited, and I basically stuck to him like glue for my entire career there. And then yeah, rest is history, man. I got out and I've been doing this now for just over 5 years, almost 6 years, seeing this particular patient population and optimizing their health and their performance.
That's awesome, man. So taking it back to like naturopathic medicine and taking a holistic approach for people who aren't familiar with that, because I am, but for people who aren't, like, what does that mean exactly? And like what, how does that differ from, I guess, the conventional medicine approach?
Yeah, conventional medicine is much more reactive, right? So if I have a symptom, I'm going to go into the doctor and they're going to, you know, maybe do a test or imaging, identify maybe what it is that's going on, and they're going to offer a prescription medication or, you know, or maybe even a higher intervention like a surgery or something like that. In naturopathic medicine, we're interested in the cause. We want to understand why this thing is occurring, right? Why the symptom is actually there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Once we identify that cause, then we want to treat the cause, because if we can treat the cause, then we can actually heal the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the major difference.
Yeah.
And then of course the different therapies. So all of your natural therapies. You know, conventional medicine definitely has its place, I think, when it comes to especially emergency medicine. But for more of a preventative approach, it's more about how we're living, you know.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, discussing diet, nutrition, and how you're moving and exercising throughout the day, how you're sleeping, you know, your stress and how you're managing that stress, supplementation, right? That's necessary, herbal medicine, even a homeopathy sometimes. And then of course there's all the different energy, you know, medicines too that can, you know, that all kind of have their place and be helpful at times. And then the thing that I am board certified in, that I've specialized in, is the biofeedback and the neurofeedback.
That's awesome. So it's mainly about getting to the root cause of the problem, not just going to mask the symptom, right? I think for me, I see the difference similar to what you said, where I think the conventional system is probably better than better for emergency care and like acute care, something that's, you have a virus and you want to take an antibiotic or something like that. Maybe it's better for that. For chronic conditions and things like this. And would you agree with this, or you could disagree with this too? For chronic conditions and, you know, autoimmune or cancer, diabetes, stuff like that, I think it makes way more sense to go with what you guys are doing, like a naturopathic approach, a holistic approach. Is that where you would say?
Totally, absolutely. You know, and I think it's also just dependent on the person's values. Like,
Yeah.
so, you know, like for me, even for acute situations, I'm not the guy that would go out and, you know, like if I know I got a virus, like I got a cold, it's self-limiting. I know that eventually it's going to pass. So if I give my body what it needs to function optimally, then I'll probably get through it just fine and quickly.
What would you recommend? Like, what does your body need to get through that quickly? Like, what would be that boost of immune system? Yeah. It's funny you say this too, because I was just texting my friend. He's like, what do I do? Should I get an IV? Should I do this? Should I go get some, should I get, he was like, should I do cryotherapy? And I was like, I don't know. I'm talking to my doctor friend right now. So that's actually a good question.
I mean, so it really starts with the foundation, right? So of course we can be reactive when we actually do get sick, but it really starts with your foundation, right? So are you getting good quality deep sleep every single night, right?
Okay.
Are you eating the right things that actually support your energy and immune system? Are you moving your body and actually exercising? Just all of those basic, you know, foundational things that a lot of people just kind of take for granted, to be honest, to establish those strong foundations of your health.
Okay. And that's,
if you have that, you're going to, on a daily basis, function much, much better.
Got it.
Right. And then of course, yeah, then, you know, you can, you know, herbal medicines like andrographis, the different high dose vitamins, either orally or IV, which is cool if you have access to that kind of thing. Your hydrotherapy, so the use of hot and cold to stimulate the immune system. Okay. So yeah, you know, there's all those different modalities.
And you could do those too if you do start to feel sick one time, just to help the immune system naturally fight it off. It just strengthens your immune system.
Give it a little bit more of a jump start. Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. That makes sense. That's
Yep.
awesome, man. All right, cool. So people who are viewing my channel are mainly business minded people, right? So I had a question for you. You're working with a lot of high level achievers and performers. What are the main similarities you see with those people?
The way that I kind of tend to think of them is as athletes. They're cognitive athletes, right? They're showing up every single day. They are highly motivated, right? They want to continue to grow and scale their business. And a lot of them know that they need to be functioning at a very high level if their business is going to be functioning at a high level. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is that, you know, when I talk to them, because they are just so driven and motivated, they don't really respond well to the word stress. They don't even really acknowledge it, that it exists.
So what do they do? Just push it subconscious, push it down to the
Exactly.
subconscious?
Like, it just doesn't even exist. They're just so, you know, goal oriented, goal focused, you know, forward thinking, forward looking, that it's just a necessity, right? And that comes from, you know, like yourself, man. It comes from starting a business. You have to put in the time, you have to put in the energy, put in the work.
Yeah.
But even when they achieve, you know, this, you know, really high level, they're still functioning as if they were when they started the business. So they're still expending a whole lot of energy that they don't really need to anymore. So it's just patterned, you know, neurologically hardwired behavior and thought patterns and beliefs. And so I would say that that's probably one of the most challenging things, is to kind of rewire that for them, so that they understand, when it comes to stress, my nervous system, that's really what we're talking about, is the brain and the nervous system. Mm-hmm. It can be overactivated, underactivated, or balanced, right?
Okay.
And balanced, that's where I want to be every single day, so that I can consistently function at that high level. And a lot of these guys, they've been just, you know, overactivated for so long that kind of fight or flight stress response has just been activated for years on end, you know, some of them decades. And so they're so worn out, depleted. And that's, you know, it's different from one person to the next, because resiliency is a completely individualized thing, where, you know, if one person was functioning at that really quick speed, high intensity for a few months, they might get burnt out. Another person, it could be a few years. Another person, it might be a couple of decades until they get there, right? So it's kind of their own individual level of resiliency.
So when they get to that place of burnout, what actually happens to the body when that happens?
Yeah. So, you know, there's three really big things, and that is nervous system balance, sleep, and which I already kind of briefly mentioned, which is the foundations of health. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they are so much consistently in that survival mode, mm-hmm. which is only meant to be used for very short periods of time. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they become depleted is because if I'm in that survival mode, my nervous system literally believes that I'm in danger, and it's using up so many resources all at once, right? Because it believes that I'm running away from some wild animal, you know.
So what resources is it using? Like, what is it? What do you mean when you say resources? Is it using like your energy? Is that what you mean?
Exactly. My physical bodily energy and my cognitive energy. Okay. So those two things. On top of that, most of them also are not sleeping very well. Either they're having a challenging time getting to sleep because they're constantly ruminating and thinking and thinking and thinking about all the things that need to get accomplished, or they're waking up in the middle of the night and they're kind of tossing and turning and just not waking up feeling fully rested and energetic. And so sleep is all about recovery of that parasympathetic restful nervous system. And so if I'm not getting enough of that, then I move closer and closer and closer into that state of, exhausted, overwhelmed, burnt out.
So sleep is number one foundation. So on that note, what would be a few practical things to get better sleep?
Yeah. One of the biggest things, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I gotta be up at this certain time so that I can get this, and this done, so I can be this productive during the day. And what I found over the years is that the thing that needs to be the more consistent one is actually bedtime. It's not the time that I wake up. That actually doesn't matter. The body's usually, if it's in a good rhythm, it's going to naturally wake up around the same time anyways, every single day. Yeah. So the more important of the two is actually the time that I go to bed. Okay. So having a consistent bedtime every single night, that's huge. Okay. And then how I prepare for sleep is probably the next big thing. Okay. So I have to have a wind down routine. Okay. And the reason why that's so important is because the brain needs time to be able to come down from the quicker brainwave frequency states, so gamma, beta, down to alpha, theta, and then finally when they're in sleep, delta.
How long does that usually take?
So it depends on the person, but I would say on average, probably like 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
At least. Okay. And so with that kind of hour wind down time, what that looks like for a lot of patients of mine is that first 20 minutes or so, it's just getting the things off of their mind that might keep them up. Okay. So writing down the things that I need to get done first thing in the morning, right? Or putting together my bag and, whatever else, so that I'm kind of prepared already in the morning and I don't have to be rushing around, grabbing this thing, grabbing that thing. Okay. And then, just typical nighttime stuff, whatever, brushing your teeth, whatever that looks like for you. So that's first 15, 20 minutes. Then the second 20 minutes is about calming down the physical body. Okay. So usually doing some light, gentle stretching of the upper and lower body. Okay. Just starting to calm down. And when you're doing that, of course, now you're in a dark room, right? Maybe there's a little night lamp or something that you have on, but overall just dark and a little on the cool side, calming down the physical body. Then the last 20 minutes of that hour are about calming the mind. Okay. So first getting the things off the mind, preparing for bed, quieting down the physical body, quieting down the mind.
Got it.
And that third phase is I really focus on with patients. So for them, it could look like a very specific functional breathing technique or a specific meditation that we're doing. But if you don't have that skill quite yet, it could be just listening to, Nature's Lullaby on Spotify or something like that, something that's just a little.
What about reading? Could you read too or no?
So yeah, great question. Here's why I wouldn't do that. Wouldn't read, definitely wouldn't watch TV or be on your phone, because that's going to be much more stimulating to the mind. Okay. And the whole purpose of the wind down is to bring the brain waves down into those slower frequencies. So research has shown, especially when I'm watching a screen, my brain will tend to be in gamma brainwave frequency, which is the quickest brainwave frequency to be in, right? So if I'm looking at a screen, more than likely I'm in those higher brainwave states.
Got it. Book is the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with reading. Yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit more or a little less intense as far as the frequency, but you're still activating the mind.
Got it. What about like visualization before bed?
Depends on the visualization, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but I don't see anything wrong with it. Yeah, it would just depend on the visualization.
Okay. Yeah, because I actually did a hypnosis class this weekend, and the guy was saying it's to do it before bed is a good time because like you're getting into your subconscious mind right before sleep. So it's good to have those positive thoughts right before bed, you know?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially self-hypnosis techniques,
Hmm.
like autogenics,
Hmm.
awesome right before bed.
Hmm. Cool, man. That's awesome. All right, I have down here, I have a couple questions. So when it comes to running a business, there's a lot of stress that comes with it. What are some practical ways entrepreneurs can handle that stress? And we kind of talked about the foundation, but are there any things they can do like when stress comes up, right? When they're feeling the pressure and it feels heavy, what could someone do?
So there's a couple of things, and so the tool that they could use, again, that's the most impactful quickly, would be a functional breathing practice. So that's number one, and I'll go into that in a second.
Okay.
Number two, which is the more long-term solution, is uh, starting to orienting the mind differently to the stressors, to the triggers. Okay, because if I can reframe how it is that my nervous system, that my brain perceives that thing, and it can perceive it as something that feels safer, then my nervous system is going to respond completely differently to that thing, right? It's not going to come at it with as much intensity or overwhelm.
So does that just look like perspective? Like it's like changing your perspective on something?
Uh,
Hold on, sorry,
Probably,
the connection just blanked out for a second. Sorry, what did you say?
I was saying that yes to your question, but also training some mindfulness techniques. So just making them more, consciously aware of some of those automated patterns and habits that they get into during the day,
Mhm.
like the thoughts and behaviors and beliefs. And once they becomes, more acutely aware of those, then it's about identifying how does it they actually want to be, right? So what thoughts do they need to have that are actually going to serve them well throughout the day? What behaviors and beliefs are going to help them continue to grow? What emotions do they want to be experiencing during the day? And then we start to practice those on a consistent daily basis. That's actually how we rewire the brain to be a new way. Um,
So it's just catch it, be aware of the thought. And then the second thing was what you were getting into, which is the functional breathing was the second part. Or
functional breathing is the first thing, actually. So we actually need to create
okay,
safety in the nervous system, right?
okay,
So the reason why I'm feeling that stress or I'm starting to feel that anxiety is because the nervous system feels unsafe. That's the whole point of that sympathetic fight or flight system, is that
okay,
there's some issue with safety. And so what I need to do is create safety. How do we do that? With a functional breathing practice. The reason why it's so potent is because it turns off that sympathetic fight or flight system, and it turns on that restful feeling at each system. And
hmm.
it's through two different mechanisms, okay, which I'll get into here in just a sec. But a lot of these entrepreneurs, they're engaging in these different dysfunctional breathing patterns throughout the day. So they're taking these large inhales followed by these large sighs. So they're frequently sighing, frequently yawning, holding their breath frequently throughout the day, short, shallow breaths up here in the chest. And after doing that for just 3 minutes, we actually decrease the oxygen to the brain by 40%. And so that has a massive impact on our cognition. The
Wow.
other thing is that if we tend to be operating out of those midbrain structures, like the hippocampus, the amygdala, these are very fear-based centers of the brain. So I'll tend to be more hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, on edge, on guard, kind of constantly problem solving. So if I'm operating out of those regions of the brain, it makes it very challenging to get out of there and out into the higher cortical centers, such as the prefrontal cortex, which is where I have more of the executive functioning. So things like focus and concentration, memory, decision making, creativity, all of those things are going to be way more challenging.
Okay.
So with the functional breathing, what
Hmm.
happens is we really need to focus. So there's a lot of components to it, but two really important ones that I'll share with your audience is the rate and the pace of the breath, or I'm sorry, the rate and the location of the breath. So as I mentioned, a lot of folks breathing up here with these, what we call accessory muscles of respiration in the chest. We call these accessory muscles because they're not meant to be used for just restful breathing. So if I'm just sitting here, if I'm walking down the hall, they're only meant to be used for strenuous physical activity. So if I'm going for a run, then I want to purposefully recruit these muscles so that I can bring in more oxygen to the system. So I perfuse the tissues better so that they work better, right? When I'm just sitting here, I don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. So what I want to be expanding into is the diaphragm. Okay, the diaphragm is the only true respiratory muscle, and it's that large dome-shaped muscle that sits underneath the rib cage here on top of the abdominal organs. And when I expand into the diaphragm, I actually activate the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. I'm sure you've heard of it before. Lots of people it's kind of a buzz term now. The reason why it's so important is because it has such a broad, restful action throughout the entire body. Okay, this nerve, it starts up in the brainstem here in the medulla, and it comes and it wraps around, it connects to the vessels of the neck, connects to the heart, to the lungs, the diaphragm, to all the abdominal organs, all the way down into our pelvic organs as well. Really, really broad restful action throughout the entire body. And we activate it when we breathe into the belly. The other thing is the rate or the pace of the breath. Okay, so a lot of these folks, again, they tend to be breathing at over 20 breaths per minute at rest, which is very, very quick. That's actually considered clinical chronic hyperventilatory syndrome, okay? But even in a normal respiratory range of 12 to 20, they can still be engaging in those different dysfunctional patterns that I was mentioning earlier. So what we do with functional breathing is we decrease the breath rate way down to somewhere between 4.5 to 6.5 breaths a minute. And at that slower rate, what happens is we activate these cluster of neurons called baroreceptors. And when we activate those neurons, what happens? Complete inhibition of that sympathetic fight or flight system. And we turn on that parasympathetic, restful, feeling at ease nervous system.
Just from breathing through the stomach, like, and the timing of the breath. So slower breaths through the belly. I'm just trying to simplify, keep it in layman's terms, because I'm not that smart, and I know a lot of other people probably aren't either. So
100%. It is a much more shallow breath.
Okay.
So very, very shallow. Like if I were to put my finger underneath my nose here, I should barely be able to feel the air coming in and out as I'm doing that slow-paced diaphragmatic breathing.
Okay, so you feel the stress, you feel the pressure, you pause, and then you get into your breathing first before you even try and get rid of the thoughts. You just pause, get into your breathing. So you're thinking, like, in my head,
that does this to the nervous system. It turns this off and it turns this on. Now I can actually do the cognitive processing, okay? And what the breathing is doing, so it's not just increasing blood flow up to the brain and increasing oxygenation up to the brain, but it's also improving the interconnectivity from the midbrain up to the higher cortex regions, okay? What that means is that it's shutting off the...
You're not going to be as emotional. Correct?
Exactly. Okay. I'm improving my emotional regulation, okay, up here, because I'm pulled out of the midbrain, and I'm improving executive functioning, right? So I'm going to have better focus, concentration, decision-making, memory, creativity. So
now you can actually logically shut down that thought that you're having that's bad.
Now I can think clearly.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most valuable thing to the people that I work with. It's just having clarity of mind.
Yeah, I'm thinking like in terms
that's how they can make really effective high-level decisions that actually move the needle in their business.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, you don't want to make emotional decisions. That's when you'll make the worst ones. So you're in these stressful situations, you pause, you breathe, and then frame the new thought, right? Is that what you were saying?
Exactly. Yep.
Then it's just mindfulness and trying to give it a different perspective.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Cool. No, it makes a lot of sense.
And being factual. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
No, I never really understood breathing in that way. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm even thinking of it like in boxing, which is the weirdest thing, but I'm thinking like, you know, if you're boxing someone, they have their hands up, right? It's very hard to hit someone when they have their guard up. So you usually got to try and get the guard down. So you throw a body punch, it brings the guard down. That's your breathing, right? You bring the guard down and then you attack the negative thoughts. That's my metaphor right now for your
I
breathing.
like it, man. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Next thing. I like that, man. That's a good practical tip to handle stress. So next thing is
super effective.
So biohacking, but like a buzzword, a lot of people doing it, right? Is it worth it? do you think people complicate things a little too much? Is it like, do you think that adding so
Yeah.
much complexity can almost stress you out to where it does less good than it does, let more harm than it does good?
Yeah. Yeah, totally, man. You know, the people that I work with, we're trying to really hone in their focus, right? We're trying to really isolate it down to just the smallest number of things that they need to be focused on, right? Because if we can do that, if we can eliminate the distractions, they're going to be far more focused and much more productive with their day,
Got
which is going to be more impactful for their business. So yeah, there's all these different things, right? There's so much different shit out there. But I've kind of got it down to a science. I know what it is that works, like what actually works as far as performance. And I try not to complicate things because the people that I work with don't have the time to implement all this, all these other different things. It needs to be simple.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, that's so true.
So
What are the things that work?
what are the things that work? So those three things that I mentioned earlier, those are definitely the most impactful. Okay. And that is balancing the nervous system and training recovery, right? Because if I'm an athlete, if I'm going to perform as good the next day, I've got to make sure that I get enough quality recovery so that way I can perform up to the standard that I want to, right? So that's huge, right? Balancing the nervous system, making it resilient, and training recovery. 2, sleep. And then 3, all of those foundations of health. So just being consistent with those things will produce consistent performance, high level performance every single day.
Got it.
And then of course there's fancier things that we can get into and kind of talk about, but yeah, those are the main ones.
With the biohacking stuff, is there any that of those things that you think are very important for them to use, like the sleep trackers and the Whoop straps and the
absolutely.
Aura rings? Like what are the best ones that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends again on the person, right? Because some of those things can also be anxiety provoking for some people. Like if they're looking at their data and they're just obsessing over it, like that's definitely the person that I'm like, all right, get rid of it, throw it in the trash. Like
Okay.
that's doing the opposite of what we want.
Got it.
But no, the ones that I like that are consumer wearables that are out there are BioStrap, probably my favorite, and Oura Ring, the other
Okay.
one.
Got
So
it.
those two collect accurate data. Okay. I know Whoop is getting pretty popular, not as accurate of data, unfortunately. And so I don't use that with my patients. And then of course there's these other clinical wearable devices that I use that we can get deeper metrics from, essentially,
Cool.
that I use
Awesome.
with patients.
Awesome. All right. And then we touched on it briefly, but when it comes down to focus,
Yeah.
do you have any tips on focus?
So the first one, of course, is the breathing, right? And let's go back to that for a second, because of course you can use it in the moment when you do get stressed, but what I'm training my patients to do is to use it as a tool every single day, 20 minutes twice a day. Okay. The reason that they're doing it for that amount of time is because it's literally neurologically building strength into their nervous system.
Okay.
And that's through some
what
of
do
the
you mean by
mechanisms
that?
that I mentioned earlier.
What do you mean by that?
So again, many of them, when they come to me, their nervous system is a little
Hold on,
beat up.
hold
Right?
on, hold on. The connection is just being stupid. Okay, go ahead.
So I was saying a lot of them, when they come to me, their nervous system is a little bit beat up, right?
Mhm.
So they've got some catching up to do. So we can do that very, very quickly if they're engaging in that functional breathing practice
Got it.
consistently every single day. So it needs to become a habit. And if it becomes a habit and they start to strengthen their nervous system up to new levels, they can get as much stress thrown at them and it doesn't affect them.
Wow.
Doesn't affect them at all because their nervous system is strong.
Just
It
from just
literally,
from that practice of breathing every day, 20 minutes twice a day.
exactly. Yep. They've literally built this neurological resiliency into the nervous system from exercising those baroreceptors that I was mentioning earlier. Exercising those cluster of neurons every single day
So
improves their ability to be able to handle stress as it comes at them.
so do you think that is because, like, so basically you're not going to just go into fight or flight for something that's not a real threat? Is that kind of what happens?
Exactly.
Okay, so just like anxiety, or like, let's say you have a client and they're complaining and you have something that would normally stress you out.
It's just
That
not
thing's
going to
not
happen.
something that's supposed to spike your adrenaline and make you go into fight
Right.
or flight. So by training the nervous system, you can kind of correct its course and allow, like, let it know this is not a real threat. This is not a bear attacking
Exactly.
me. Right? Okay.
Exactly. It doesn't
Okay.
react and respond in the same way because it's stronger. It doesn't identify that thing as, like you said, as a threat.
And is that through just the breathing, or it's a mix of the breathing with also being able to catch your thoughts throughout the day and practicing that as well? Like, it's both of
So
those things.
that's just the next level,
Okay.
right? But just the breathing alone will absolutely do that. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
How long would you
so
say, like, how many days would you have to stick to that, two a day, 20 minutes a day? How many days do you think you'd have to stick to?
dude, so I mean, literally, and this is not an exaggeration. I've had patients that in a week they've already noticed that they're not responding to things the way that they used to respond to them. All right. They're not getting activated by the things they used to get activated by. Things are coming with much more ease to them. Okay. Um, Usually in like 3 weeks, they're sleeping better, either getting to sleep quicker or they're staying asleep longer or both.
Hmm.
And then usually within that first 4 weeks is when all of those cognitive things really start to come back online. All right. So their ability to focus better, their decision making, their creativity, right? All those things really start to fire back up.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so that's huge. And then the other thing that I would say is, just creating the environment for deep focus, and that just means eliminating distractions, right? So, um, if I can, putting the phone on silent,
Yeah.
right? Only having one single tab open on the desktop,
I'm the tab guy.
or
That's
one
me.
or one app open, like whatever it is that I need, the smallest number of things that require me to finish the task at hand, right?
Mhm.
And how you're prioritizing those is what's the highest leverage thing that I can do in my day, right? So what's the biggest, right, impact thing, and then I just go down the list, right?
Got it.
You get the first thing, that's done. Now I'm just solely focusing on this next thing.
It's one thing at a time. And
One thing.
that comes back to that research on, like, you brain actually only focuses on one thing at a time, right? It literally can. Right?
Exactly.
Like, it's called, what is it called? Task switching or something like that. When you go from, like, when people think you're multitasking, but you're actually not multitasking.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, you froze a little bit, but you heard what I said, right?
I did hear what you say. Yeah, you're
Okay.
good on my side.
Okay, cool. Sweet, man. All right, I had, like, let me see, two other questions, I think.
Yeah, go for it.
So, supplementation and diet, do you get into that stuff at all with the performance?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's part of the foundation, man.
Okay.
Um,
So what would you say is, like, the best diet supplements
yeah,
regimen that a high performer would need?
totally. Yeah. So I mean, first, I individualize everything to the patient. There is definitely not a one size fits all. approach when it comes to diet nutrition, and especially when it comes to optimization and performance medicine. But just as kind of a very broad overview, I would say that trying to stick to a kind of a modified Mediterranean ketogenic style type of diet seems to work well across the board for cognitive performance. Having that largest meal in the morning having the first meal of the day being the largest meal, and then subsequent meals throughout the day are smaller. So that last meal of the day is actually the smallest meal of the day, and try to have that 4 to 5 hours before bedtime. Usually.
Okay, so first meal, biggest, you're saying,
Yeah.
and then you're saying last meal, smallest, but it's 4 to 5 hours before bedtime. So like if I go to bed at 9, it's at like 5 o'clock, right?
Exactly. You got it.
So you're really finishing eating early. Could it be the other way around, or would you not recommend that?
I would absolutely, and that's what so many people like. Oh, that's what almost everybody does.
That's what I do. Yeah, I usually start eating at like 12, and then I finish eating at like 8 or 9.
Yeah. So when I make that just little tweak with my patients, the biggest thing that they know is that they're getting better sleep, number one. So their sleep improves, they're getting deeper sleep. They've got more energy, right? Just first thing in the morning, just ready to go. They've got more energy. And then because they've got more energy, they've got more mental energy as well. So their ability to focus and concentrate and those things improves. Just on that simple tweak alone is huge.
What time would you recommend eating that first big meal? Because sometimes when I eat a meal, I guess it also would be, I could be wrong here, because if it's a ketogenic meal, I probably wouldn't feel like brain fog at all. But sometimes if I eat a big meal, I'll feel a little bit of brain fog, and it's kind of harder to focus. So do you suggest eating it like right in the morning when I wake up, or like mid afternoon, or what's your recommendation on that?
Yeah. So again, it's individualized from person to person, kind of just depending on what their day looks like. But I would say within the first hour,
Okay.
maybe first hour or two, depending on how early it is that they're waking up.
Okay.
Having that first meal.
And that's more of a ketogenic meal, not as many carbs, not really spike the inflammation as much, kind of keep it lower.
Yeah, very nutrient dense. So
Okay.
lots of colorful veggies, good sources of protein, definitely in the morning. Want to make sure that we're getting enough protein because we need that for our energy and for our cognitive abilities. And keeping the carbs very moderate, and in the form of those, complex carbs, those whole grains, not the simple refined sugars.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And then you're it is kind of recommending like an intermittent fasting. No, if you're stopping eating at like 5 and you're starting eating at like 9, that's an 8-hour window, right? So is it similar to that?
Yeah. And it's not, like I said, it's not for everyone, but for most folks, this type of regimen works pretty good.
Okay. Well, that's pretty interesting.
The reason why it does is because, digestion uses up so much of our energy. So much of our resources get used up in the function of digestion. Okay. So not just breaking down the food, but then absorbing and assimilating the nutrients and getting them where they need to be. That whole process is digestion. So it's a massive process, and it takes up more than half of all of our energy in the body, just doing that. So the earlier that I can stop it at night, now the more energy that can be shunted to recovery processes in the body. All right. And so the better that I can recover and the quicker that I can recover, now the more intensity or the higher level of performance that I'm going to be able to have the next day.
That's super interesting. I'm glad you said this, because I've always done it the opposite way, where like I've always done it. I've always
totally
thought
backwards. Yeah.
Well, I've always thought digestion, what you said, it takes up a lot of brain power, right? So I didn't want to take up my brain power in the morning when I'm doing a lot of deep work. But I kind of get what you're saying, where it's more important to prioritize the sleep and the recovery over the morning time, because then I'll probably have great deep work anyway from getting great rest and recovery.
Absolutely.
This is something
Yep.
I'm definitely going to test, and I'm going to text you how it works.
Awesome,
I
man.
got to do
Good.
this for like a week. This is nice. I like that.
Cool.
That's a good tip.
And then as far as supplementation, there's a lot of different things. I would say for energy specifically, like what you were asking about biohacking, the things that I would say that are probably the most impactful would be CoQ10 or ubiquinol.
Not familiar with it.
So that one is definitely about energy production, especially for the nervous system and cardiovascular system. Acetyl L-carnitine is another one.
Heard of that.
Its job is to transport fats from outside of the cell to inside of the cell. And so it's a very obviously efficient use of a fuel source of energy. So then once it's inside the cell, it can actually be used for energy production. ALA or alpha lipoic acid. So that's another energy production one, especially for the nervous system. And then a lot of people are familiar with B12. Instead of doing just isolated B12, I'll do a B complex that contains all of the activated B vitamins, because there's the B vitamins in their inactive form, and then there's the B vitamins in their activated form. In their activated form, they're instantly ready to use, and of course, usually a higher absorption rate as well. And so I would say those four probably the most impactful. And then there's other ones like NADH and NMN. There's a lot there.
Cool, man. And then these are things that you would need to supplement, or could you get these in your diet too?
You could absolutely get these things in your diet. But as far as, like if we wanted some quick energy, we need super physiologic doses of these things. And so what that will typically look like is taking a lot of these at a fairly high dose twice a day.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense, man.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So got nutrition, got diet, went over sleep, went over breathing, exercise, anything on movement, and then I think that's it.
So frequency is far more important than intensity. So a lot of people, for their stress relief, they like to just hit it hard, man. They like to go nuts and really go high intensity with it. And they feel awesome for a couple hours, maybe a few hours even. But then the reason why that's happening is because when they're exercising at that higher intensity, they're stimulating that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight nervous system. And that's much more activating. We still good on the connection?
It went off for like 2 seconds. So you could kind of just repeat what you said, like for the last 10 seconds. If that makes sense.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So when they're at that high level of intensity and exercise, it stimulates their sympathetic fight or flight system. Okay. Cool. So it's pushing them deeper into that fight or flight system. All right. And if we're focusing on strengthening and balancing the nervous system, what I would recommend to that individual would be more restorative, rejuvenating types of movements and exercises, right? So a lot more stretching, walking, yoga, Pilates, just, they're not getting their heart rate above 120, just taking it a little bit more gentle, but still moving consistently every single day. And then the other thing, like I was saying, is frequency is more important than intensity, just overall. Study after study shown this. The more frequently that I'm moving throughout the day, the better that it is for not just metabolism, but also energy production. So sit to stand desks are wonderful. And just taking frequent breaks, I think is also good for our focus and concentration as well. Very cool. 10 minutes every hour, something like that, walking down the hall, walking up the stairs, around the block, whatever it takes to just get moving more frequently.
So then when it comes to the weightlifting and the intense workouts, would you just recommend like less of them, like
Just
doing
less.
3 days a
Yeah,
week, 4 days a week, not 7 days a week, not 6 days a week, something like that?
exactly. And probably even less. It really depends on, after we do measurements of kind of where their nervous system balance or imbalance is,
Mhm.
it might be more like twice a week.
Wow. Okay. And
Yeah.
then and then still, would you still prioritize like muscle growth and things like that? It's just you just don't want to be intense too much. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to overtax their nervous system if we're trying to focus on building their resiliency
Mm.
and balancing out their nervous system, right?
Is
So, like,
oh,
if
sorry. Go ahead.
full performance optimization is their goal, then their nervous system, sleep, foundations, more important than the intensity of their exercise and building muscle. Like, we'll get there, man. It's going to take a few months, but we'll get to the muscle building stuff.
Okay, so you can do it. It's just the sequence of it is what matters. Where when you
Yeah,
have the resiliency and the nervous system is built and it's strong and you're not responding to fight or flight so much, then you can be like, all right, let's get back into the bodybuilding stuff and let's start to where
absolutely.
you could lift 4 times a week or something like that at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then you can start
Okay.
to get a little bit more intense because your nervous system can handle the intensity now.
During the lifts, would you recommend like being aware of your breath work?
Um, yes, after you have the skill and you've kind of got the skill down, right? It takes a little while to go from, starting at laying down, usually doing the breathing technique because it's a little bit easier laying down,
Mhm.
then moving to sitting, and then finally to incorporate it into activities when you're standing and moving around. Um, just immediately going to it when you're doing activity would probably be too challenging.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense, man. All
But
right.
yeah, eventually, absolutely. You'd ideally wanting to be breathing in those mechanics almost all day long, right?
Really?
Unless, my metabolism requires me to start breathing more quickly. If I were running, or if, let's say the fire alarms go off in the building right now,
Mhm.
and my nervous system better activate because I've got to run and get out of here, man. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So my breath rate should start to increase to meet metabolic demand.
That's when fight or flight actually makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Got it, man. No, that makes sense. And then when you say you should be doing this breathing ideally all day, it's the diaphragmatic breathing, right? From the belly.
Yes.
It's not intense breathing. It's more like you barely feel it when you're breathing in through your nose. Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes. Very effortless, very gentle, very shallow.
And then last question for you. So like why, because you know how there's so many people that recommend different things. Like why is there like Wim Hof when he does like his breathing, it's like that intense,
Yeah.
what is that? What's the purpose of that in comparison
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Oh,
the
this is
breathing you're
such a
talking
great
about?
question. Yeah, this is a great question. So super popular, right? Wim Hof breathing. And there is a place for it. Most of the people that I work with don't need it though, right?
Okay.
Like, if I had an issue with getting myself uh, motivated to just sit here and do the work, then something like that might be helpful because what it's
Hmm.
doing, that type of overbreathing, right? That type of chronic hyperventilation, it's actually purposefully activating my nervous system. It's putting me into fight or flight.
Is that what that's doing?
That's what it's doing. It's the same exact thing as exercise. Think about when you're
Oh.
lifting or when you're running, you kind of get that high, right?
Hmm.
It's the same thing. Breathing that way so intensely for so long, I get the same high.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
I start to feel really good. I start to feel energetic. I'm woke up essentially, right? That only lasts though for a certain period of time,
Hmm.
right? It's going to dissipate that energy,
Got
that
it.
level of focus. Um, I don't want to continue to use that day after day after day because then same thing, it's going to move me closer into that sympathetic fight or flight.
Got it.
And I, more often than not, should be in that parasympathetic, restful, relaxed, feeling at ease nervous system. Okay, that's where I'm going to be able to access the parts of my brain and cognition that I want to, where I'm actually going to, as we were mentioning earlier, make good decisions that have an impact on my business.
Is that where you're in a flow state? Is it parasympathetic when you're in a flow state, or is it the other, like more like fight or flight?
No, you should be more, you should in that flow state feel a little bit more relaxed, at ease. But your brain waves are certainly moving a little bit quicker.
Got it. Sweet, man. All right, awesome. So I think that's all I wanted to cover.
Cool.
Last thing, where can people find you, man? Where can people look you up?
So I'll give you maybe a link to put below.
I will do that.
But my website, performance-doctor.com.
Cool.
And then
and I'm going to force you to make a YouTube channel.
And then I do have one for the local business. So I can give that one to you.
All right, cool.
But yeah,
I'll drop it all down below.
And then or my Facebook as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'll drop it all down below too. I'll get it from right after this one.
Awesome.
Sweet, man. Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it.